Reporter TV. What happened to Loren Allred after Britain's Got Talent? For years, millions of people knew her voice without knowing her name. Then she walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, performed Never Enough, and suddenly the woman behind one of the Greatest Showman's most recognizable songs was standing in front of the world. It looked like the perfect moment for Loren Allred to finally become a household name. But what happened after BGT was not simply a story about another talent show contestant becoming famous. Loren already had a major Hollywood credit before she ever auditioned. She had already sung for millions of people, and after BGT, her challenge became something much harder, proving that Loren Allred was more than just the voice behind one enormous song. Before Britain's Got Talent introduced her to a new audience, Loren had already experienced something most singers spend their entire careers chasing. Her voice had appeared in a major Hollywood musical. In The Greatest Showman, Rebecca Ferguson portrayed Jenny Lind on screen, but Loren provided the singing voice for the character. That meant audiences were hearing Loren during one of the movie's biggest musical moments without necessarily knowing who was behind the recording. Then Never Enough became a massive favorite with fans around the world. The song was emotional, dramatic, and almost impossible to forget. But there was an unusual problem.
Reporter TV. People remembered the voice much more easily than they remembered the singer's name. That distinction shaped Loren's career in a way that few people outside the music industry probably understood. Being the voice behind a major movie performance can open doors, but it does not automatically make you a celebrity. The audience sees a character. They remember the actor. They remember the movie. They remember the song. The person who actually delivered the vocals can become the missing piece of the story. For Loren, that meant she had already achieved something enormous, yet she still had to introduce herself to the public. And that is exactly why her appearance on Britain's Got Talent mattered so much. When Loren stepped onto the BGT stage in 2022, she wasn't simply another singer hoping for a breakthrough. She had a secret weapon that most contestants could never have. The audience had already heard her before. They just didn't realize it. As Loren began performing Never Enough, the song suddenly took on a completely different meaning. This wasn't an unknown contestant attempting a famous song. This was the actual singer who had helped create the version audiences already knew from The Greatest Showman. For anyone who recognized the voice, the realization was immediate. And for everyone else, the performance created a new question. How had someone with that kind of history remained relatively unknown? The BGT audition changed the conversation around Loren.
Instead of being identified only as a studio vocalist or the singer behind a movie character, she was now standing on a major television stage under her own name. Her voice was no longer separated from her identity. Viewers could finally connect the two. That exposure introduced Loren to people who may never have searched for her after watching The Greatest Showman. Her story became easier to understand. She wasn't suddenly talented because she appeared on Britain's Got Talent. She had been working toward a career in music for years. BGT simply gave millions of viewers a reason to finally pay attention to the person behind the voice. But there was another challenge waiting for her. Once audiences associate a singer with one massive performance, escaping that association can be surprisingly difficult. Never Enough was not just another song on a resume. It was the performance that introduced Loren to millions of people. And that creates a strange trap. Every new performance can be judged against the song that made you famous. If you sing Never Enough again, people ask whether you can recreate the original magic. If you move in a different direction, people may wonder why you aren't giving them the performance they already love. Either way, the famous song follows you. That is why Loren's post-BGT journey is more interesting than simply asking whether she became famous.
The real question is whether she could build something beyond the identity of the singer who performed Never Enough. Her career needed room for original music, new performances, collaborations, and opportunities where audiences could hear Loren without automatically thinking about Jenny Lind or The Greatest Showman. That is a much bigger challenge than winning one audition. A talent show appearance can create attention overnight. Building an identity that survives after the attention fades takes much longer. And Loren had another advantage that most contestants don't have. She already understood the professional side of the music business. She had worked at a high level before BGT. She knew what it meant to record, perform, and deliver vocals for a major production. So her post-BGT story was never really about starting from zero. It was about repositioning herself. She had to take the credibility she had earned behind the scenes and turn it into a public career where people knew exactly who they were listening to.
That shift is important because there is a huge difference between being successful and being recognizable. Loren had already been successful. Her involvement with The Greatest Showman proved that. But recognition is different. Recognition means someone hears a voice and immediately knows the name attached to it. BGT helped close that gap. It turned Loren from a hidden part of a famous performance into the central figure of her own story.
And this is where the title of her career story becomes almost ironic. The career nobody saw coming wasn't necessarily a sudden explosion after BGT. It was the fact that Loren's biggest challenge came after the moment when everyone finally noticed her. The audition was the reveal. Everything afterward became the test. Could she keep people's attention once the surprise wore off? Could she make audiences interested in Loren Allred rather than simply interested in the story of Never Enough? Could she turn recognition into a lasting artistic identity? Those questions are still more important than any single television appearance, because Loren's journey shows how unpredictable the music industry can be. Someone can contribute to a huge cultural moment and remain relatively anonymous. Someone can have a voice heard by millions and still struggle to make their own name stick. And someone can finally get the spotlight, only to discover that staying there requires an entirely different kind of work. There is also something very human about Loren's story. Most people imagine that being discovered is the hardest part of becoming successful. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the harder part comes afterward, when people have already formed an opinion about what you are supposed to be. Loren became associated with one enormous vocal performance. Now she has to show audiences everything that exists outside of that moment.
That means taking the attention BGT created and turning it into something sustainable. The most interesting thing about Loren Allred today isn't simply that she sang Never Enough. Millions of people already know that. The interesting question is, what happens when the singer behind a famous voice finally gets the opportunity to define herself? BGT gave Loren a public platform, but it did not write the rest of her career for her. That part was always going to be up to Loren. And maybe that's the biggest twist. Britain's Got Talent wasn't the beginning of Loren Allred's career. It was the moment more people finally caught up with it. She had already worked in professional music. She had already contributed vocals to one of the most recognizable movie musicals of recent years. She had already created a performance that audiences remembered. What BGT changed was the connection between the voice and the name. So if you only remember Loren Allred as the singer behind Never Enough, you're missing the more interesting part of the story. Her Hollywood breakthrough came before most people knew who she was. Her BGT appearance finally put her name in front of a huge audience, and everything that followed became a new challenge, turning one unforgettable performance into a career that belongs completely to Loren Allred. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't getting discovered. It's making sure people don't stop looking after they discover you.
And for Loren Allred, the real story may have started when the BGT stage went quiet. The cameras moved on, and she was left with something far more difficult than a famous audition: the chance to build a career that people remember for her name, not just her voice.